All right, so tell the people a little bit about you.
Good morning, everybody. So Yosra Saleh, I'm Vice President of Digital Marketing at Potbelly. Potbelly Sandwich Works is a QSR sandwich brand. We serve hot, tasty, and very fresh sandwiches along with very tasty sides, from soups to cookies and shakes. I can keep going on and on about how delicious our menu items are. My role is focused on digital and loyalty. So by digital, I mean the customer experiences on our app and web, first party and third party, digital and loyalty program strategy, as well as implementation. So both are key drivers to business and growth, obviously, and we interact directly with customers through our engagement and experiences.
So like many restaurants, you're figuring out how to incorporate digital into the overall customer experience. So where is Potbelly on this journey, and kind of what's your vision for how digital incorporates into the overall experience for your guests?
That's a great question. So for Potbelly, digital is 40% of our sales, and it's been growing in importance and value. Really, like before COVID, but COVID helped accelerate that, and it helped senior leadership as well as consumers truly understand the value of digital. Digital and loyalty are really two sides to the same coin. You cannot separate them apart, and it's really important to understand that digital and loyalty together can drive the accessibility of the brand, whether you're talking about a QSR brand or really any other brand in retail. Customers, they make their first purchase or they stay with the brand because they love it. They love the product. And especially in food, there's a lot to say about quality and taste, et cetera. But loyalty and digital together, they can help the brand become sticky, and they can drive accessibility. They can be the one additional visit that you get from a customer. And because there is the first party data, obviously, and the ability to engage with the customer one-on-one, there is that great opportunity to unlock incrementality. That one additional visit, that one additional dollar spent can mean a lot when you start to look at it across like a million something loyalty base or digital user base.
Yeah. As you're approaching this really with that like consumer first lens, I think most businesses would say they're always customer first, right? Right? It's a product-driven messaging. Why do you think that is, and kind of what are the pros and cons to that approach?
Yeah, I always question when a company comes and says we're customer-centric. My first question is really, and I think it's really tricky because a lot of times brands are focused on growth, and let's not kid each other. We are in business to drive revenue, but the approach to drive that revenue is where it gets really tricky. And who's in the room making those plans? Is it just brand management or product-led teams, or do you have really the voice of the customer in the room? The voice of the customer is best expressed perhaps through insight teams. Are they part of the planning process? And also digital marketers who are responsible for the revenue per customer. When you start incorporating those folks, then you get diversity in terms of planning. And then what is our primary metric? If the primary metric is only engagement or top-line revenue, you're not really looking at incrementality. And maybe incrementality is where we get to see how we can cannibalize our own efforts by maybe becoming overly or excessively product-focused. We got to understand that customers, they are buying because there's something in it for them. Yeah. So and expressing what's in it for the customer, or really what are their guardrails around frequency, mailbox management. How often do they want to see an email from our brand or a push notification? Or collectively, when we put all of the life cycle, how much are they willing to hear from us? When we lose sight of some of those very, very basic principles, a lot of times we end up losing the customer, and with it we lose the cost to acquire and all the investment that we've done to bring that customer into our funnel.
Well, I think that's a really good point, because sometimes with these personal channels that you own, right, with email, with SMS, right, like you're hitting them directly in their kind of purview. One bad interaction, they unsubscribe, they move on, and you've lost that customer forever, right?
Absolutely. So I think loyalty and digital are very tricky in the sense that they are free, or they are considered to be free, at least internally within organizations. So as a digital marketer, it's important to educate cross-functionally that there is a cost for those channels. And I don't mean the cost to develop the creative or to like launch the email. It's truly the opportunity cost of that message. How does it stack in terms of ROI and incrementality to other opportunities? How often does a customer want to hear from us? So let's say as a best practice for email, we don't want to hit the same customer with messages more than 4 to 6 emails a month.
Yeah.
If you're sending them 12 emails, well, yeah, if you're engaged, if your metric is overall redemptions, maybe that is so high, but are you also looking at the relationship between churn and number of messages, or churn and visits and traffic compared to number of messages? And I've personally done those tests across multiple brands, and there is an inverse relationship between the number of emails you send per customer a month and sales and visit. Sometimes, especially in a challenging macroeconomic environment, you want to be super conscious of what you send out there. It needs to be relevant. It needs to establish an emotional connection, because customers are already stressed. They don't want to have to deal with another irrelevant message. So when we start to put all of that in context, and there's a huge priority to kind of storytell that and show it in terms of data to senior leadership, as well as cross-functional teams who may have different priorities, it starts to become like more evident for them that they're like prioritizing the customer needs in practice can help them gain more revenue and more traffic.
Yeah. Well, you're probably getting requests from your brand counterparts of, we have to push this sandwich, we have to push this LTO, we have to push this menu item. So how are you balancing just that need to drive the business? We all want to drive sales, right? Like, let's be very honest up here. But how do you approach them who need to drive the product with, you're like, hey, this is not the right thing for the customer because we've already hit them 6 times this month?
Yeah, I think it's starting with the KPI, or at least that was what has worked for KPI. So instead of a KPI that focuses on top line, we start focusing on incrementality. Is it incremental? Do we absolutely need to send an offer with that message about a product? How relevant is it? So for example, if we are launching a meat kind of sandwich, is it relevant to all customers? If I am a vegetarian, does that apply to me? Have I ever purchased something that has meat in it? So we start breaking it down in terms of, is it incremental? How much ROI is it going to drive? And then what is the time frame of how we evaluate the performance? Is it just the day of the promotion, the week of the promotion, or is it during and after? Because there's also cannibalization. So while, yes, you may have driven, X redemptions during that week, and you see your sales spike and revenue spike, how about the week after? In many cases, we see that there is cannibalization on the post period. So when we start looking at it that way and then truly defining incrementality, we start putting out other options. We can say, yes, if your objective is to drive awareness for that product, we can do that by segmenting it to the most relevant customers. If it is about driving overall revenue, we may not need to associate an offer with that product. We can do an offer to certain targets, and then we drive that incrementality of the one additional visit and the one additional, or additional dollar spend. And then over time, instead of doing large blasts, if we do incremental, small, but consistent experimentation and implementation, we can add more revenue and more traffic than what has been initially planned.
You've said that word incrementality a lot, which is what we're all striving to do, right? I think if we just look at top line sales, it's like, well, prices have gone up across the board. Of course, sales are up, right? But so how are you defining incrementality? Is it an additional item on your check? Is it that one more visit? Is it a net new customer, a lapsed guest? Or is it some kind of blend of all of those things into one?
Yeah, that's a great question. It can be a blend of all, but it can also mean, especially within the lens of loyalty, when we start doing a lot of experimentation and we define control and methodology for incrementality, it becomes easier to measure that like additional visit or additional spend. Certainly with lapsed members, there is like that obvious and maybe easier way to measure incrementality because they've been lapsed. They have not visited in X days or months. So when you truly bring them back, that is like in and of itself, even without the control, incremental.
So this is the vision that you're building to, right? The blue sky opportunity. But let's like peel back the layers a little bit. How are you approaching kind of setting your foundation across your capabilities, your technology providers, what's realistically able to do to help kind of execute this vision?
Yeah, so understanding that, like, ultimately we want to drive a frictionless, delightful experience and then offering relevant content or offers to our customers. So I think starting with the frictions is a great place to start because you don't want to be doing all of that effort around driving net new or engagement and then your customer comes in and they see frictions in how they redeem a reward or how they are able to add a product to the menu. So like first off, manage the frictions and then look at your cohesive ecosystem and MarTech stack. How is it all integrating together? Are we like, how are our emails coming across, our push, and then our content on digital? Trying to link it all together. And I would say starting with the foundation of data is extremely important because if you do all that effort and you're unable to even define what is a friction point, then you might be chasing the wrong path. Yeah. So starting with data, I would say, is the foundation, and then building on that from looking at all the touch points that the customer goes through in our digital and loyalty ecosystem, and then implementing simple but best practices across all of those touch points as much as possible. Sometimes we are limited in what we are able to achieve due to resources or honestly just overall goals. So try to prioritize in terms of what is the highest ROI and what are the biggest friction points and start from there one step at a time. If that becomes a rigorous process, then over time you see that most painful to the customers, and then you're adding in more delightful experiences as you go.
If the word of the day yesterday was tariff, I think the word of the day today is going to be friction and frictionless. So what tools or how are you looking at it to identify where customers are having pain points in their journey? Like, what are you using to identify those in the first place to kind of start your process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the digital world, especially on first-party apps, there are great tools that can tell you how long the customer is spending with a certain page. If you see that session time is too long, that's probably indication that they are unable to get to the next step. You look at abandonments, cart abandonments, or task abandonments in general. That's also a really good indication. And you look at their reviews. That's usually very, very insightful. And a lot of times also connecting with operational teams in the field, they are a great resource in terms of telling you what they are hearing from customers in the pain point. So some of it is quantitative, and it's done through product analytics tools that are readily available out there, and some of it is being in tune to your field team, to your franchisees and operators, because they are like your first line of defense. They interact with the customers quite a lot, and sometimes it's even app reviews. I can't tell you how often we've reverted to app reviews in terms of trying to unlock what is truly a friction point. And these days, there are also session replays.
Yeah.
Those are super, super helpful in terms of understanding where is the customer getting hung up in the experience.
I love that you talked about the voice of the customer, because at Arby's, it was funny, as all these tools that we have available to identify the customer friction points, the best one was our support staff, right? Our call center. The amount of information that I got of where customers are struggling in the call center feedback that we get, I mean, that can inform your entire strategy, right?
Absolutely. So let me tell you a story about that. We had launched our loyalty program, and we were trying to evaluate how easy is it to convert coins. So we started looking at customer complaints, and there's a lot of frequently brought up cases around, I don't know where my coins went, I'm unable to redeem coins, et cetera, et cetera. So we started looking into that more carefully, and through going through the experience on the analytics side, we realized, yes, we do have some friction points that could be improved, and there are opportunities to educate more about how to redeem your coins or how to see your history. And then quantitatively, that was proven to be a friction point. But it started with just like an insight or a qualitative input from customer complaints.
Yeah. Let's talk about your loyalty program and personalization. Are you thinking of this as kind of that immediate transaction driver, or how are you incorporating it and building the program to really drive long-term brand retention?
I think it's both. We know in QSR as well as in other businesses, we want to build sales today and brand over time. Loyalty helps do both for a brand. And today we are able to drive transactions, obviously, with the loyalty program structure and ensuring that there is value offered to customers. Loyalty is a great tool to ensure that, because value isn't only the savings on a transaction. It's also status. It's also the ability to come in more often and not have to worry about that additional spend. And then over time, you're building loyalty truly loyalty with the brand and brand love. And when customers feel that there is reciprocity, they do pay it a lot more. So I think generosity is really important in loyalty when it's done with moderation. And at the same time, like really offering that personal content and personable offers so that customers feel that they are heard and that they are being integrated into like all what we offer in terms of food as well as messaging.
I love that you introduced the concept of all of these other things that can mean loyalty to a customer, right? It's not just about the discount, because so much we just divert back to the discount. It's like, it's the offer that makes the loyalty program. But so if we think about that value, that price point, how are you building a smart offer engine at Potbelly to protect your bottom line, but also help them convert?
Yeah, so there is no easy answer to that, and it's easier said than done, quite honestly. But I would say experimentation. We don't know what we don't know, and really when we put an experiment out there, it is only defined in terms of who is it being targeted to, so we can't always generalize, but it's a continuous, rigorous process of experimenting and learning more and expanding your learning agenda, and looking at the profitability of the offer that's being sent out as well as its impact. And through iteration and modifications of those pilots and experiments, you start to gain better understanding and start to make it more and more granular to where instead of doing one to all, you're coming to one to few, and then gradually you're reducing that few to hopefully one to one, but that's like a long-term process. But it has to start with implementing experimentation as an approach, as opposed to spray and pray or carpet bombing with some of like the traditional ways of doing loyalty.
Do you think one-to-one communication, personalization, whatever it is truly achievable?
That's a trick question.
Oh, you figured me out.
So I think it's aspirational in many ways, and while We may not be able to do it truly one-to-one. It's something that we gotta work towards to reduce that gap from one to all to one to few to better than one to few. I don't know that, any brand has necessarily cracked the code. We are all striving to do that, but it's an approach that is worthwhile and important to keep pursuing, because we will never know a customer 100% one-on-one. We can only try as much as we can, and it's through that rigorous experimentation and understanding of the customer profile, their 360 and so on and so forth, that you're able to narrow the gap between one to few to one-to-one.
Yeah. Well, and you hit the nail on the head of the stair-stepping approach, right? Like maybe no one will ever get to true one-to-one. Maybe we never need to go there, but so many people share similarities into their likes, their preferences, right? So going into that stair-step approach will help you kind of build to the dream.
It's logical, I think. If you're a vegetarian, again, you don't want, maybe it's irrelevant for you to be hearing about a pork-related product. Yeah. So starting there is a good place to start. And then you start to peel the onion a little more. Let's look at channels. If you never order in store, we might want to modify your behavior to order in store or to order in digital. But if we've consistently done so and it's not tracking with you, even if we include offer, et cetera, maybe that channel is not for you. So when we start to plan our omni-channel support, we can look at it by channel and what's most relevant to customers. And then you start peeling it more and more and more. If you are, for example, a new customer, maybe sending you a points offer is not the best approach because you don't understand the value of points. But if you are a high-value customer and you've been with the brand for a while, you understand what it means to have points or coins. So that's more of a currency that you can activate on. So understanding those things at a basic level and then starting to get deeper and deeper can help brands maybe bridge that gap between, aspirational one-on-one to one-to-all or one-to-few.
You introduced omni-channel, right? So let's talk through that. All of the different ways that customers can order with you, from delivery, owned, third-party, on your app, in-store. What does that kind of cross-channel customer engagement look like for y'all?
I'm thinking, especially on our first-party channels, we cannot truly separate between loyalty and digital. Everything that we send them on loyalty, they can either redeem it on store or they redeem it in the digital channels. And our primary ways of communicating with them is through, our own channels, like email, push, SMS, and in-app messaging. So looking at all the channels and the journey of the customer and touch points from when we send them the message or from when they start joining the brand and where they are in their life cycle. That usually helps us put together a cohesive journey and serve, provided obviously that the brand has the capabilities to support that in terms of personalization. Then you're able to serve them the right content in the right channel with the right message, as cliche as that sounds. But it's like breaking it apart in terms of where they are in their journey, and then what are the channels that you are able to reach out to them through, and then what are they engaging with.
Yeah. With all of the channels that we have at our disposal, are there touch points that matter more, that really help drive that conversion, or are they all weighted equally?
I think it's it depends on the customer and what they are engaging with. We know that there are best practices in terms of if you are a new customer, you just signed up to our loyalty program, you downloaded our app, we want to give you a bit of a preview of what is our experience going to be like and onboard you a little bit. So finding ways to onboard and understanding what cues do you want to introduce in that message, in that touch point. If you're a new customer, we probably want to be more celebratory because you've just joined our program. And then if you are lapsed, we want to maybe introduce a bit of an emotional cue in there around missing you or what's in it for you to come back. So I think it comes back to where the customer are in their journey and what is at our disposable, but certainly the capabilities supporting it helps a lot, because as a brand, you might be able to do a lot of things if you have those capabilities in place.
The onboarding is so important, because sometimes as brands, when we get a customer to come in, subscribe to our email program, our app program, it's like, oh my gosh, marry me. And it's like, whoa, can you date me first? Like, tell me a little bit about your brand, please, right? So you slow roll them into all the Potbelly experience.
Absolutely. And also understanding what to put in front of them.
Yeah.
So just because they are seeing that onboarding message, you can't tell them all the features that you have in an app. You got to prioritize.
Yeah.
Maybe they're, like, especially with attention spam, the way that it is right now, less than a goldfish. But like, really prioritize what you have to put out there in front of the customer, and what's truly meaningful for where they are in the journey.
Yeah. Last question before we'll open it up to the crew. When it comes to the improving and optimizing the overall customer experience, what's the biggest opportunity that brands have to make that better?
That's a trick question. I think it's probably just shifting the mindset around ROI. That there is truly like an ROI aspect to everything that we put out there, from features and enhancements that may require development to like activation, offers, messages, etc. When we start to look at ROI as opposed to like total engagement or top line, we are able to get deeper into the opportunity cost of doing that effort. And then also back to what we were initially talking about in terms of friction points, growth isn't going to come unless you truly address the friction. If you're not addressing their pain points, they can go to another brand or even third party, which is in many cases competitor to first party. And I've heard a lot of people talk about DoorDash and how competitive they can be even within the mediascape. So
frenemies, right?
Right. So it's the same thing with a first party experience.
Yeah. I could keep going all day. I'm near and dear to this topic, but what questions do y'all have for Yosra?
Hi, Brittany Lopez with Rio SEO. I have a question. It seems like you are very thoughtful with your approach on the client services side, and often one of the struggles that I have with my clients is their organizations are so very siloed that they don't speak well to each other. We may have really valuable insights that we could hand over to the store ops team, but they don't know who that is, or vice versa, right? So how do you keep that thread throughout your organization, and how do you break down those silos?
Yeah, that's a great question. Cross-functional collaboration is really important, and some organizations understand it better than others. I would say being an advocate for that by like doing the work and setting up the process, whether it's stage gate or planning, etc., that usually helps other teams see the value. So sometimes you're not able to just raise a hand and say, hey, we need so and so and so, but you can certainly model it if there is a digital or loyalty focus or whatever your area is. Start incorporating them into your own like planning processes and implementation processes. Do truly like cross-functional connects, and then slowly but gradually others in the organization start seeing the impact of that integration and diversity into like the results for that particular project.
Okay, over here to the right.
Hi, Sam Clark, Head of Search across Media. Given the competitive environment that you exist in your vertical, do you think about your loyalty programs as a way to sort of create favorable paths to conversion for you? Like, for example, do you try to incentivize people converting online, given that like the likes of Subway, for example, have so many physical locations where they could cannibalize that volume if you're driving people to store? Or is that not really a massive consideration for your group?
I would say absolutely. We've seen over and over again through multiple brands, and you guys probably have touched that too, that digital users, because of the accessibility and the convenience, they can bring in just more additional visits. Their frequency tends to be higher than in-store, and also their spend, because it's easier to, upsell using the digital properties sometimes than it is in-store. We can educate all day long with team members, but, when it is a high rush hour, sometimes team members are pressed in time and they don't often, upsell, or they may not know what's super relevant to that customer. So on digital channels, there is that opportunity for driving higher frequency and higher spend. So it's absolutely prioritized. But at the end of the day, the customer wants what they want. They have their preferred channels. We don't want to eliminate in-store 100% because there's a unique brand experience that comes to life through in-store, but we also want to make sure that, online conversion and usage is prioritized through the experience, even in the in-store touch points, so that, when there is the need for more convenience and accessibility, the customer has that fallback option of, oh, I can deliver through the app, or I can, than being able to spend 30 minutes in a store for lunch.
Straight ahead.
Hi there, Sondre Storsten from M&C Saatchi Performance. I was curious how you approach driving growth on mobile. Of course, in the QSR space, it's a big thing for loyalty, and you can do a lot with it, but I'm curious how, you go about getting new users and then keeping them around.
Great question. So I think like net new customers especially is a collaborative effort between brand teams, media teams, and then digital teams. So the upper funnel, we certainly rely on our partners on the media and the brand side to be recruiting net new customers, especially if there is the opportunity to do lookalikes with our highest value members. That makes it even better for us. And then throughout the experience, being able to, again, back to the idea of incrementality, offer them that additional value that will help them modify their behavior, and throughout their experience, communicate what's in it for them, so that, if it's about, fresh products, customization, all of that needs to be really emphasized in the experience. I would say also looking at your in-store experience, what does your customer get in-store? They can get the moon and beyond in some cases with products and customizations. How can you bridge that gap in mobile so that they are also being able to have that flexibility with building their own product, customizing it to their preference, including their dietary preferences, and so on and so forth, and being able to seamlessly order. I think those are like really crucial in a mobile experience. It may seem very, very basic around, removing frictions or being able to place an order quickly, but you'd be surprised at how much that can go into making that like very simple experience more complicated than it should.
Okay, time for one more.
Hey, Yosra, great panel. Thank you for being here. I'm Jeremy Cooker, New Orleans and Company. You talked a lot about experimentation. Can you go a little deeper on that? I'm curious about what kinds of experimentation have you found to be most impactful in terms of loyalty and engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I think there is no limit, quite honestly, around what we can experiment. And it may start with just a vision board around all of the possibilities that are out there, from segments, their frequency, their spend, to day part and behavior, channel optimization, offers, types of offers, offer language, discount depth, offer timing, reward expiration. I can go on. And then you can add also products. What is relevant product? What is incremental? upsell, I think it starts with the vision board around all the possibilities that are out there, and then starting to craft pilots and dividing those apart into really small variables that you can test, validate, and then rinse and repeat. It is easier said than done, obviously, as with anything that we do, but it takes kind of consistency, and also setting up a sprint type of way of working where you are able to have operational support for whatever you are testing in terms of offers or other variables.
Yosra, thank you so much for kicking us off this morning. That was such a good conversation.